Hello, Ryan here, and welcome to Star Citizen Sunday. This is a weekly show which covers all of the news from the week just past. Be sure to subscribe if you like what you see, and let's get on with it. This week, we check out progress on a reclaimer derelict settlement. We finally get to see how salvaging will look. Plus, the EUPU team share tons of information about life support, engineering, looting, as well as subsurface mining and mining veins. What a week! So this week's Inside Star Citizen kicked off introducing the player experience team, who are kind of the bridge between us, the player, and the developers. Basically, they are the team that test many issues that players highlight, reproducing issue council reports and pointing them out to the developers to fix. Kind of a vital team, in my opinion, who are acting as the voices of the players, helping to get bugs known and fixed by developers. A great introduction to the team, and if you are interested in meeting them and hearing more from them directly, of course the link to Inside Star Citizen is in the description below. But moving on from that, there was a new sprint report. First up, we can see new docking areas being created for Orison and many other space stations yet to get the docking function. Hopefully in the near future, we will see more ships capable of docking to space stations and eventually other ships as well as this tech evolves, as it hasn't really expanded to any other ships beyond the initial, 2, 3, 4 ships when it first appeared, so it'll be nice to get that expanded on. Next, we can see the mess hall interior grey box images for the Drake Corsair. As you can imagine, it's very similar to the Caterpillar. We also got to see the cockpit, which we also saw a much more detailed image of this in the newsletter sneak peek recently. That looks insanely detailed, and of course all these buttons will be hooked up to functionality that you could click on them and trigger them and whatnot. Or you could, of course, just keybind them all, makes it a lot easier. The Drake Vulture was next, which is currently finishing up final art with 4 prospective liveries. For me personally, it has to be number 2 with the orange and grey paint. It looks very nice. After this, we took a look at an upcoming reclaimer derelict and derelict settlements. Now, derelict ships are going to be categorized under 3 various types. We have old wrecks, new wrecks, and inhabited wrecks. Here we can see the preliminary work on housing modules for settled wrecks that will be found both inside and outside of the wreckage. Loving the look of these settlements, having NPCs living there, providing missions, will be an incredible new addition when ready. Really excited for this. The tech is also being developed to allow the object container that contains the derelict to pick up biome information from wherever that wreck is dynamically spawned. So if it is spawned on Microtech where all the snow is, it'll have a buildup of snow. If it is, like we can see here, in a jungle perhaps, ivy and other plant life will start taking hold. Now this is pretty impressive, as they want to get these wrecks embedded in the planetary generation tool, so when the planet is created, it'll procedurally create and populate the planet with various wrecks of varying ship types. And this will automatically make the ship look and feel like it crashed years ago. Love this idea. Of course, in the future when we have the physical damage for ships, there won't just be hand-placed, artistically driven, procedurally generated wrecks where they may have settlers or not. Any ship that a player or NPC crashes into the ground or falls to the ground will eventually become wreckage in itself for salvaging, which we will talk about in a second. The team are also building up a library of derelict shaders for various states of decomposition, and as Jared says, when all of this work is brought together, it'll mean a greater variety of points of interest for players to discover, and new mission areas spawned when we accept the job, all dynamically placed and dressed as needed. Love how these are turning out, and I can't wait to see all the other various shipwrecks created in the future. We know they are working on the Mercury Star Runner and 600i wrecks, and of course once they're done with them, they will expand to other ones. Love this Montreal studio. Finally, we got to see the current work in progress of the salvaging beam visual effects. Now this is not the final state of the gameplay or even the visual effects. They are just showcasing the current VFX involved, but also do note that the dedicated salvaging tool is on the character's back, which looks pretty cool. Now, personally, this looks very satisfying, and I can't wait to be stripping the materials off of the hulls. It is going to be so therapeutic. And again, this is just one salvaging method, being hull stripping. Of course, after the initial release, there will be so much more to salvage to come later on, expanding from just one material to many different materials with different values, taking components and weapons and then cutting the ships up into pieces. Jared did mention though that we will learn more about salvage, both ship-based and hand-based, in the next quarter ahead of its introduction to the PU, so certainly showing confidence that salvaging tier 0 is going to be released in 3.18. So very happy to finally see how salvage is gonna look. That was a great episode of Inside Star Citizen. There is only one more episode left before the 3-week hiatus, which we will hear more about after Star Citizen Live. Talking of which, let us move on. So this week's Star Citizen Live was an absolute monster of a show, speaking with the EU-PU gameplay feature team. Now in the show, they do talk about refueling, engineering, life support, room depressurizing, and the future of mining veins. It is quite a big one, so grab a drink and settle in. So the first set of questions are going to be talking about refueling specifically, with the first one being, how does the refueling process work in 3.17? So by either using the Starfarer or Starfarer Gemini, once you've spawned your ship, you sit in the seat and you open the vehicle maintenance service app on your Mobiglass, and then you'll have the option of either an automatic or manual refuel. Auto will just refuel the Starfarer's internal fuel supply, so for its own use, and manual will allow you to refill both your internal tanks and any of the 6 fuel pods located on the back. Now the first 2, I know there are 8 pods on the back, but the first 2 are refinery tanks. And you can fill these 6 tanks up with either hydrogen or quantum fuel, and how much of each that you wish to have. Now once you are full, you can wait to see someone requesting a refuel in space. No beacons with the first initial release, it'll just be using global chat. They will come at a later patch, so do be extra careful when approaching a refueling situation, as it could be a trap. But the player needing fuel can then target your ship, and then press N to request a docking. The Starfarer owner can accept the docking and then extend the boom arm, and the ship needing fuel can then auto or manually dock to the boom. Once attached, the Starfarer can then set the price for both fuel types, or give it out for free. You can do that. I'm sure the fuel rats will take part in this. But after the price is set, the ship in need of fuel can set the amount of fuel that they want using the Mobiglass vehicle app, and then the fuel operator can then open the tanks to the specific tank that they want to distribute the fuel from, open the nozzle, and then control the flow speed, which will control the time it takes to refuel the ship. Now once done, either ship can then end it. You can either press abort on the Starfarer or just press and hold N again, I think, to detach from the boom arm, and whatever fuel has been sent will be paid for, as it is held in escrow. Now the length of time it takes to refuel a ship will be determined by the ship's fuel tanks, of course, as well as the speed at which you control the nozzle. Smaller tanks taking less time, like the Gladius, I think they said will take around 45 seconds with the default speed of the nozzle, with the larger ships like the 890 Jump taking much longer. But we're not talking hours here, we are still very much within minutes. The next question is, what changes have come in since we first heard about refueling, as they were hoping to get it in for 3.16, but it took a little longer. Now the system, they say, hasn't changed much, but you do have to pay attention to your flow speed so that you don't damage the nozzle. They were also able to add a mechanic where the more fuel pods that you have open, the more fluctuation you will see in the system that can inadvertently cause the flow speed rate to increase or decrease. Now I quite like this idea. I like that if you are careless or you don't have much knowledge of the system or how it works, you can actually do more harm than good. And they did say a while ago that part of this whole needing skill is giving the player the ability to cause harm. So learning the best ways to not cause harm and understanding the system will require more than just a simple case of pressing buttons. It will actually take thinking about what you're doing. But the main difference, they say, since 3.16 release and now is the UI. The extra time between the builds allowed them to improve it much more. Also, we will be able to bring in direct control on the pods themselves out on the gangway. So individually opening them, closing them, or pumping them, which is partly for extra control options, but also for opening up the possibilities of sabotage, which means an extra crew member or just a member of the crew might be required for safety purposes or security, going out and patrolling the gangway every now and again to make sure that no one is out there first and foremost, but also that all the pods are closed, otherwise it could inadvertently fluctuate the flow rate. Very nice, lots to think about there. The next question is, can we refuel ships or snubcraft in the hangar, like the Constellation and the Merlin connected, or just any ship you put in a hangar? And they say no, not in 317, but eventually that is the plan. If the Starfarer is attacked, will the fuel be destroyed or will it be dropped? Now for 317, the fuel will explode along with the Starfarer, but on the UI for the gangway pods on the outside, there is a detach button, which in a future build will be useful, so being able to drop fuel pods. And once ships are able to be disabled and not just instantly destroyed, you will be able to drop the pods and take them, attach them to your own Starfarer, or maybe drop them in a cargo bay and transport them around. So lots of possibility there for salvaging, maintenance. I think there are options for different types of fuel pods as well, with all strengths and weaknesses. So kind of getting ready for that, but not in the initial release. Next question, kind of follow up to that question, is will hydrogen fuel ever be a lootable item? And they have been considering what can be lootable and found in loot boxes or specific locations. And fuel is not out of the question, but it does depend on how refueling and the mechanic continues to develop. And when it comes to things like hangar or ground vehicle refueling, it could be a findable, lootable item that you can find a canister of fuel. And they are considering everything to be lootable, and I'm sure there will be canisters or boxes when the cargo refactor comes along that will allow us to actually transport fuel as a commodity, but not inside of a fuel tank, for example. So I'm sure it will expand in that way, but again, not for 317 definitely. Next question is, will all ships have physical refuel ports on the top? And to follow up with that question, what are the secondary fuel ports used for? Because some ships have them at the rear, like the Gladius has one on the top at the front for refueling with the Starfarer, plus one at the back. Now, not all ships will have the physical port location for ship-to-ship refueling in 317, as these are kind of being brought out with the ship gold standard passes, but they can still refuel using the Starfarer. You just won't be able to see the port attaching. Now the secondary ports are for ground and hangar refueling using a pipe or a hose and physically plugging that fuel hose into the ship, which is going to be so fun when we have something like a homestead, parking your vehicle in a hangar and then using a physical hose attached to a fuel supply or whatever to then fill them up. I love the sound of that. Next question, how does the introduction of ship-to-ship refueling change pad refueling on a space station? And only the UI has changed, nothing else, although I guess each station will now have their own fuel supplies, which will be finite, and the introduction of the quantum system will allow AI to refuel stations, but of course this isn't this team's work, that is a different team working on that. Next question, will there be an easy way to share the location of those who need refueling? And not for 317, this is relating back to the beacon system. They need the service beacon system to expand to do this. So you're basically going to use global chat to tell them your location, or better yet, maybe use the party system. But I'm certain in 317 when refueling comes along, there will be many problems with people getting attacked and so forth, which is part of the intended gameplay and will be fun in itself, especially having to take escorts or man the turrets. But ultimately there will be a lot more granularity to that with reputations, service beacons, NPC response, security forces and so forth. But I'm still happy we're getting this in 317, even if a lot of it is going to end up getting attacked. It'll give us something to get on with. So the final question for refueling is, what is the future of refueling after 317? So, as you would expect, service beacons, but there is also some stuff that didn't quite make it into the 317 build, like a tractor beam for pulling a ship closer to the nozzle, as well as more finer control over the nozzle itself, rather than it just being a static boom arm that sticks out. They also want to make it more interesting for the player attached to the boom arm, and he did specify while in flight, so maybe maneuvering to maintain connection, which will be a lot of fun to try, trying to fly and refuel at the same time, but that's, I would expect, likely more intended for atmospheric refueling, like we see in aircraft of today. Now, moving on, we have a few questions relating or regarding mining. The first question being, are there any plans to expand on the multi-crew mining system? And they said yes, for the short-term solution, they could bring in maybe bigger rocks, that require more lasers to work together. But they do have much bigger plans to improve multi-crew mining. For example, some rocks having weak points that need to be hit simultaneously, coordinating together with the lasers to time it right to get the rock to crack. So maybe having a big reward in that rock to work together and communicate. They will also be expanding on the functionality of the mining gadgets, so placing the mining gadget over a rock to manipulate the weak spots, but this, they say, is a lot further off into the future as the team have moved on to things like resource management and live support, and basically getting all the features in-game first, and then they will go back and expand on the previous ones from there, which I am glad about, because mining is in a good place right now. It is enjoyable. It is lacking a lot of stuff, but ultimately it's more evolved than any other system. So moving on to other systems like we're seeing with Salvage, life support, engineering, refueling, and then expanding on them to get them into the game now so that we can start working on them and playing with them and testing them, and then going back over the next few patches and iterating on them to expand them into more developed systems. Next question, are the asteroid scanning bugs fixed? And they say there are some new mining and scanning fixes coming in for 3.17, and they hope that they've resolved these issues, but of course if they haven't, report them to the issue council and they will work on a fix for them. Next question, how do you plan to balance mining to make it more lucrative and drive the economy, as right now it seems quite expensive and dangerous? Now they say this is more of a question for the team working on the dynamic economy, not really their line of work, but he does say that once player or NPC demands expand and crafting as well comes in, there will be more reason to mine other things. So for me to elaborate further on what he's saying, right now mining is profitable, but only if you are going for the 5 or 6 valuable materials that we have available. Once the economy expands and becomes more dynamic, and the production of everything, every item that we have in the game creates that supply and demand for the raw materials, then we will start to see all of the mineable resources begin to fluctuate in value, making them more of an option depending on the economy. Also, as he says, there will likely be missions from NPCs and even players or in-game corporations requesting X amount of mineral Y to be mined and delivered as well. Now, when he mentions crafting, this was a relatively more recent decision, as crafting wasn't really a planned mechanic, but it was suggested that players could craft a med pen, for example, at a refinery station, so long as they have the necessary materials to make that item, using a kiosk, for example. You basically choose what you want to create, put the materials in, and then it'll pump that out for you. Whether it is going to be like that in the end game or whether it will expand to be more hands-on, we don't know, but crafting is now planned. So again, all these materials that are just laying dormant in rocks will have a place eventually, but it is more of a economic system that drives that rather than the EUPU team. Now this next question pretty much warranted the best answer of the show, for me personally anyway, as it talks about mining veins. The question being, is the plan still to have subsurface deposits and veins that we can tap into? And they say yes, this is still the plan, and once they have land claims, or being able to purchase or scan a portion of land, the players should then have the ability to dig a hole and mine, which also opens up the possibility for other cases, he says. Now for me, this was kind of one of the big questions I've been having for a while, and I've wanted to hear more about mining veins ever since Chris Roberts kind of mentioned it during one of the roundtable discussions, but it was very promptly halted. So this means that a player could find a huge vein of mineable resources under the planet's surface by scanning that planet, and irrespective of whether they buy or own that land, or just go straight ahead and mine it, they will be able to build things like mining outposts and set about mining the ore from that location, which could take days, weeks, maybe even months, depending on how much is under the surface. Now, what I didn't expect to hear though in this answer, and this could have just been an accidental misuse of the word, was dig a hole. Now, we were always told that terrain deformation will not be possible by the player beyond something like farming. But we also saw one of the developers, Will Hain, who was working on Rivers, show that he has been playing around with terrain deformation when using a grenade launcher, so as the grenade explodes, maybe blowing a crater in the planet's surface. But we were told at that time that he was just messing around and exploring what could be possible, and that it doesn't confirm terrain deformation, but they will look into the possibilities of what this could mean for Star Citizen. So if that dig a hole comment wasn't a slip of context and will actually be possible, mining will eventually become way bigger than what it is now, digging to reach veins of ore. And if that is the case, I cannot wait to see what tools, vehicles and equipment and outposts that we will be able to use or build. But quite a huge statement there, and I'm so glad that mining veins are still part of the plan, and mining will certainly expand massively once they come back round to building that system out, like we heard, once they start looking at land claims, I guess. Anyway, moving on to life support and the engineering questions. First question being, how is life support and what is holding up the mechanic? Now, they say it's progressing well, but there is still a lot of work from many various teams to go, not just their team as well. All the ships will need to be addressed to be able to utilize this system, and the room system itself is consistently getting upgraded to support the new features. Now, life support and engineering will be a big system that will expand the multi-crew aspect of Star Citizen, and how managing and maintaining a ship will be a big job, and includes things like the fire system as well, so giving players something to really think about, putting out fires, managing resources, components, distributing resources. Plus, this is what will take ships from the time to kill to a time to disable, and having players on board running around trying to fix and swap things out on the fly, relaying power to keep the ships moving, and these systems are actively being worked on now. Next question is life support still a system to prevent clown carring? And yes, the way that it will work is that life support systems will have CO2 scrubbers working at a certain rate, and the more players that you get on board the ship, the harder they will have to work. And it does say you could continually be swapping out these CO2 scrubbers as the system will degrade the harder it has to work, so you could have more people on board. It isn't going to be like a hard limit stopping you from getting more people on board, but it will be systemic. So the more people you have on board for longer periods of time, the more the scrubbers will have to work and you'll have to replace them. And this will scale depending on the amount of people. Of course, if you are on a planet with oxygen and you just open the doors, then the atmosphere will flood through the ship and you won't need to use life support. You will just have the external atmosphere helping. But life support, as they say, is not just oxygen. There are pressures and even temperature to be affected and controllable. And the more players inside the ship, the temperature will increase as well. What that will do for things on board the ship, we will have to see, but it really sounds like it's quite a huge system, way more involving than what I ever imagined, which, as with anything in Star Citizen, creates a profession for those who are good at it to charge more for their help. Now, it was often wondered how this room system will affect ships like the Valkyrie or the Cutlass Steel, where the ship will have multiple people inside, but of course these ships will only be used for specific short-term use cases, so dropping many people into a location quickly, not necessarily having that many people on board for a long duration flight, but also many of, if not all of the people on board will likely be in their own armor and suits with life support rolling providing oxygen. And if they don't, then that is likely because they are being deployed in a location with oxygen, so you could just have the doors open and everyone can breathe fine and the life support won't be working too hard or even at all. The ship will take on board the external atmosphere, providing oxygen. Next question, will life support be a per room or per ship control system? And it will be per room, so giving the players a room by room choice of setting the temperature, the pressure, the oxygen, and even things like the scrubbing rate per room, deciding what atmosphere you want for each room individually if you so choose. So a lot of choice, and it was mentioned that they will ensure that this system has a good focus on usability, so it doesn't feel overwhelming and tedious, allowing for a scale of interactions that each player wants. So the default option will run fine, but giving you the option to really define what you want where, if you so choose. Next question, will life support systems require consumables that must be restocked? And yes, you will have filters for the air scrubbers and potentially heating elements for temperature control. I suspect there will be others, although he didn't mention too much, but all of these will need to be maintained, swapped out, maybe even upgraded with better versions, or eventually salvaged if you want to salvage these items and sell them on. Next question, will we be able to depressurize a room for combat advantages? So they did specify being able to turn off life support to then put the extra power to weapons or shields, so distributing the system based on where you want it to be. But in terms of defensive or offensive use cases, you will be able to disable oxygen to a room if the attackers in that room are stupid enough and not wearing helmets. Or you could heat that room up, perhaps to cause other player status effects, or the pressurizing of rooms and then opening doors to vent the attackers, perhaps. And although not life support specific, you will have the option to turn off gravity or lighting and so on, making it more difficult for the attackers. Now on the flip side, attackers could sabotage systems if they manage to get into an area like engineering or wherever the life support systems are found and then tamper with them to stop you from breathing or whatever. Or for both sides, maybe even the potential to pump toxic gas into a room. They didn't say that would definitely happen, but for example, if you start a fire, then it will suck the oxygen from that room, and obviously carbon dioxide or monoxide, whatever both may be, will start becoming a problem. So there is a ton of potential for multi-crew, for boarding, for engineering, which will be fun to see evolve and just expand more on that group play. Next question, what can you tell us about resource management and that whole system, and how is it coming along? Now, the resource generation and management system is basically giving all the players resources to interact with, so fuel, batteries, power plants, coolers and so forth. So you'll have the fueling of power plants to generate energy, which then can be distributed to all the other components within the ship, turning systems on and off, giving priority to other systems and managing them on the fly on all ships. And yes, all ships will be continually updated to accommodate all of these systems as they come online. Now they say this resource system is expanding as it is needed for life support, and they have begun working on the proper engineering HUD and UI, as the life support system and UI will be incorporated into the full engineering system. So it's just another screen for the engineer to deal with. Now this system will likely be a station on the bridge and maybe in the engineering section, so the engineers can access the system when they need to. But I think it would be quite cool if I was to put an opinion out there that could tie the engineering HUD to any MFD within the ship. So as an engineer moves around the ship, anywhere there's an MFD, it would be quite cool if you have certain clearance to access those screens to access the engineering screen. So you could access it if there is a problem in one of the corridors without having to go to the engineering section or to the bridge. Just my 2 cents, but I think that would be quite cool. Now the final question for this engineering and life support is, what is stopping the decompression mechanic? Now it's based on priority first and foremost, as the people who would be implementing the decompression mechanic are currently working on life support and other systems. So later down the line, when life support is finished, they will likely move on to the whole system of decompression. But there is still a lot of other teams who are required for that full room decompression system, like audio, visual effects, and so on and so forth. So it will be a joint effort when it comes. Now the next bunch of questions is talking about looting and the future of looting. First question being, will portable loot boxes snap to cargo grids? And they say yes, this is planned, but the loot boxes are currently under review. But they do plan on players being able to stack them up on their cargo grids. But this of course will be awaiting the cargo refactor. Next question, why are there no standard cargo unit cargo boxes found around derelicts? Now they say the system is ready to allow this, but it requires the level design team to begin placing them around the wrecks. So we are likely to see this coming someday soon, I suspect. If they are ready to go in, the level design team will probably want to bring them in just as soon as they can. And as we have seen, the Montreal teams are currently creating new derelict locations. So I'm expecting that this will be in for an upcoming patch sometime this year once we start seeing these other wrecks come around, and it will be nice to be able to just pick up a full standard cargo unit of an item, of a commodity that we find at a wreck, and sell that, because these 1/8 boxes clearly are not really worth that much. Something that Jared did mention though was that there are only 9 of these Pico balls found throughout the verse per server as the server starts up. So do get looking and know that only 9 exist. Whether this increases for 317, we will see, but they may remain as only 9 and hold insane value to them. Next question, what are the rarity levels of items and will they be coloured? And thankfully, they will definitely not be coloured, as it doesn't really suit the level of realism that Star Citizen is going for, which I am very happy to hear. As we know, we will have common, uncommon and rare loot types, but what that means is not globally set yet. It will be location dependable and follow a more logical sense of the word rare, basically based on the expectancy of finding that specific item in that specific location and how likely that is. As Jared kind of explained, the Pico mascot will be a common item on Microtech or around New Babbage, whereas Finley the Stormwall, being Crusader's mascot, will be pretty rare, and finding both at Lawville, for example, might be even more rare, or maybe in Pyro, being extremely rare. It is not a measurement of an item's quality, or that the blue items are better than purple items. It's more a case of just the logical expectancy of finding that item there. And I am, as I say, very happy about this, as Star Citizen's model is skill-based, and not stat-based or skill level based, if you get what I mean. And if they are able to remove the meta completely, then this system will apply even more. It makes no sense to categorize Star Citizen's items of rarity based on stats like this weapon's DPS, for example. And when Pyro comes in, rarity will be even more of a bigger deal, bringing items only available in Pyro back to Stanton and selling them back to shops will get a much better price than selling them in the location where they're found, and vice versa. But also it allows those players not really wanting to travel to certain locations access to those items if other players are willing to bring them back and sell them to a shop and then pay the price for that item as it's more rare. So very happy that they are taking this logical route. Now the final question is engineering classed as a profession like mining or salvaging? Now they say yes and no. It is a profession in itself, but it's not like mining or salvaging, as you are not gathering resources to trade in. You are providing a service, and if you are a skilled engineer, for example, you can charge more for your services. And this pretty much applies to everything in the game. If players are adept at, say, navigating and finding the best possible route from location to location, or dogfighting or FPS ability, even something like cargo handling, if a player is good at any of these, they will be able to make a living from doing that in the verse, making it a profession. So there we go. Quite an impressive episode. So happy they've managed to reschedule this episode, as I was very excited for it. Loved hearing about all the systems coming up, like engineering and life support, and how in-depth they are going to be, as well as the future of mining veins. I have been waiting to hear more info and confirmation on this for a while, so I'm glad that they managed to get that out there. To finish the episode, Jared did mention that next week's Inside Star Citizen is the last of the quarter before the usual 3-week hiatus prior to a patch release, which will take a look at the patch report, so reeling off what is coming in with 317, plus something that he cannot tell us as it is a surprise. No idea what this is. Could it be the Drake Mule? Could it be a different ship? Could it not be a ship at all? Do take a guess in the comments below. Also, Star Citizen Sunday next week will be Jared and Jeremiah Lee doing some dumb stuff, so I'm sure that will be quite fun to watch. But he did also mention that based on visas, it might be the last show that they do in the US, as Jared will be moving to the UK during this hiatus. We still need answers as to why. My guess is to do with Chris Roberts being in the UK and pushing to close out Squadron 42. I'm going to stick with the idea that it could be to work on these Briefing Room series, which is a series that will air on the run-up to Squadron's release, which CIG did say that they will return when they are on the road to releasing Squadron a while back. That is just my thoughts. We will see. I'm sure Jared will address it when he comes back. But that was one of the best Star Citizen lives. A lot of information, but let us move on. So also this week, we had a new Aramis post exploring life as a Tavaran family in the UEE. We had a new 317 patch watch post on Spectrum highlighting some of the lesser known features coming in with the next build. The link is in the description below should you want to take a look. And finally, the latest jump point is available for all RSI subscribers. So that brings us to the end of the show. If you do enjoy my content, please consider subscribing and hitting that like button. Also, I am able to do this thanks to my very generous patrons and channel members. If you appreciate what I do and would like to help make it even better from as little as $1 a month, all of the links are provided below.